with no further ado, she climbs mountains, she climbs rock walls, I think, and she knows a lot about quality management systems. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, Maren Nelson.
Thank you, Joe. I put together a few slides because I think this is helpful to walk through. So can you see my screen?
Can.
Awesome. So I wanted to start out because I think definitions are always important. So you may have your own definitions for these things, but for today in this presentation, this is the type of information we're going to be talking about. I'm not recommending or making any assumptions about document structure or organization. We're just talking about the type of information. So what shows up in the quality manual is the information on your QMS scope. What are the regulations? What are the standards and things that you want to be compliant with? Then you have the actual content of the regulations themselves, which form the requirements for your procedures. You get to the step-by-step or detailed processes that you're going to follow, and those are your procedures. And then the records and the completed forms are the bottom part of it. We're going to be talking mostly about the first three top areas. I am taking out of scope for right now those regulations and standards like RoHS and biocompatibility, because those are product focused, not QMS focused. And these are very general ideas, kind of high level. I know there's a lot of nuance in the details. I know this group has a ton of information about those nuances. So if you'll bear with me and we'll stay kind of at the high 10,000 foot level for a bit, we can talk about the nuances later on.
You just let the kind folks at home know what RoHS is if they don't recognize the acronym.
So that's the reduction of hazardous substances. It's a European regulation that talks about the material content in your products. So it's very specific to the product composition.
Thank you.
All right. So as an angel investor, if I'm talking with a medical company, or a startup company, one of the first things that I ask them is, tell me about your processes. What are your processes going to be looking like? And they usually proudly assert, we have a QMS. Great, nice start. Then my follow-up question is, well, what does your QMS include or cover? And they go, oh, okay, we're going to get a little more detailed here. So typically at least 21 CFR 820, which is the FDA regulations for a quality system, or ISO 13485, which is kind of the European standard for a medical QMS, are in scope. I'm going to throw a lot of numbers around in this presentation. If you have questions about them, I can address them later, but these are, again, kind of high level. So if you have a more advanced system, there's some additional standards on medical safety risk management and usability and writing medical software that have quality system pieces in them. So maybe your QMS includes those. If you get really advanced, maybe you talk about electronic signatures and the protection of human subjects, good laboratory practices, all of these things that might be in scope. So, and there's a longer list too. But then the next question I would ask is, well, how have you structured your QMS? And the typical answer is, oh, well, we structured it per 13485. So those are my categories for how my QMS looks. So if I draw a picture of that in my head, kind of 13485 focused, it looks like this. So here's my company processes. I have a quality management system. I have kind of product development, production, management, doc control, post-market, right? Looks like a pretty complete set. So what am I missing from this? From a regulatory perspective, there's some other really important things that a medical company has to do. And Michelle will certainly tell you this. You need to make sure that you are looking at how you're doing your regulatory submissions, how you're doing your regulatory reporting. And what do you do if you have an external audit? So those are some typical things that I see added. So then here's my first process picture update. Still quality management system, added these new pieces in. Okay, we're really building out our quality system now. Well, there's a pesky thing about governments is that they've also created regulations for things other than medical devices. And those other regulations may also apply to your company. So what am I talking about in that case? Well, if you're a startup company, often you're looking for an SBIR or an STTR grant. When you get that grant, make sure that you look at the list of requirements that you need to meet, because there's a lot of them. There are far more pages of grant requirements than there are quality management system for medical product requirements. What are some of the other ones? You may be dealing with HIPAA. That's not specifically medical device, but certainly can affect you. Oh, and OSHA, right? OSHA kind of cares what's going on. And then maybe you have electrical safety outside your medical product that you need to worry about. Maybe you need to worry about chemical safety. Oh, finance, man, finance. I remember being at a company and we had just finished a financial audit with no struggles, anything, like the rest of the company didn't even know what was going on. And the finance VP said to me, he said, why is it that a medical device audit is this huge deal where the company gets involved, but the finance audit is sort of like just taken care of? But a finance finding in an audit has just as much capability of shutting a company down as a medical device finding. So, okay, well, all right, maybe I should pay attention to this. Import and export can have a huge impact on the cost associated with the company. Transportation is an interesting one. If you have a device that is normally equipment on an airplane, the FAA actually requires you to have a procedure or written in a procedure somewhere that you will check the airline regulations on a certain frequency and that you will update your product to meet that. So if you have, for example, a defibrillator flying on a plane, the FAA will audit your quality management system to make sure you have procedural coverage. So while these aren't really QMS, they certainly impact the business and they may overlap with QMS activities. Well, are we still missing a few other things? Like maybe sales, marketing, finance, legal, employee benefits, right? All of these things, like maybe your exit strategy that you're talking about. These are non-QMS activities that nonetheless are things that the company may want to be paying attention to, including facilities management. So what do we do with this? Because most companies want to keep the quality management system sort of really focused on the quality management. Well, here's our second process update. We're going to keep our quality management system, but now we're going to create another business system of requirements with that marketing, sales, legal, finance, all those other things in it. But we've got some bubbles that sort of look similar to what we had in our QMS processes, like management and resources and other records. But we're keeping these two things separate, right? Because we don't want to have our quality management system, we don't want an auditor coming in and auditing what's in our business system and thinking it's the quality management system. So there's a real goal to keep these things separate. So now we're all set, right? We have our quality management system processes and we have our business system processes and we're chunking along and life is good. So let's take just a little bit of a deep dive into a couple of the areas to see how these might look if we're actually operating in them. The first one, because I absolutely love talking about supplier management, is first of all, looking at the requirements. So if you're a startup company and you have not gone to actually read the quality management system regulations or read 1345, I highly recommend that you go and do that. It's probably not nearly as complicated as you think it's going to be. So this is the verbatim.
Maren, let's back that statement up a second. It's like if you've read it, but raise your hand if you even know what it is if you're a startup.
I was thinking the same thing, Michelle.
Like I said, first thing would be go and actually look at the regulations. I know, and I say this later on, but I know you've run into the situation where you're talking with a startup company and they say, oh yeah, we've almost got our product developed, so then now we're going to go do our QMS. And Yeah, that's the wrong approach. For this right now, this is not a very complicated thing to meet, right? These are not very high requirements. You do have to meeting the quality requirements. That's really important. So how does this look if you're a startup company and you've actually looked at this and you say, oh yeah, we've got our QMS. So the question that I would ask is, have you evaluated your suppliers per the quality management system? Again, this is coming in as an angel investor, potential angel investor. Often the answer is they're 13485 certified. So clearly we're all done, right? I have sufficiently identified this supplier. Well, is that really enough? I mean, if you're a business and you're looking at making money, is knowing that a supplier is 13485 certified enough? From, again, an investor standpoint, maybe I want to know about, have you looked at their cost? Have you looked at delivery times? All of these typical things we think of as a business need isn't covered by my quality management system. So now I have that some part of my supplier selection up in the quality management system and some part of it's down in my business system. Okay, well, what else might happen? Again, I mentioned SBIR grants, and I'm going to come back to this because I think companies, particularly startups, don't appreciate the amount of overhead that an SBIR grant can bring. But if you have an SBIR grant, all of a sudden the equal opportunity suppliers and minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses and all of these additional criteria need to be in your processes.
So Maren, can I jump in, please? I got a
You
question.
bet.
I got a burning question here.
Go, Paul.
So I'm a supplier, right, in the supply chain space. And I
Yep.
literally have a pharmaceutical company that wants to, I was talking to the director of supply chain and he stopped. He said, okay, this is great. I like what I'm hearing, but the next call has got to be with my quality person. I was like, oh my gosh, it's actually now hitting us in the sales cycle.
Huh.
So
Good.
right? So so maybe they're one of the enlightened ones, but to be more prepared from my side, I'm going to ask a selfish question. Is there a protocol or a suggested set of questions that a company should be asking a supplier? You've got them on your PowerPoint, but where is this coming from? Is this your genius, your IP, or is the industry standards on how to manage and evaluate a supplier?
This comes out of my experience, and I do have a longer list in terms of supplier selection criteria.
Okay.
It also comes out of appreciating very much what the supplier management engineers actually do in a company, both from a quality side and from a management side. And this is a whole rabbit hole we can go down. I did a presentation on this that I can send you the link for. The point for this presentation is that the requirements in your quality management system for supplier selection aren't going to meet your business needs.
No, agree. Oh, totally. And I think the answer is yes, it's your IP, it's your experience, because you've put it, you're really putting the filter on of saying, how do I protect my company? Right. I want to really lean in as a supplier and say, hey, these are the questions you should be asking us. Oh, by the way, I already have them. So anything you can give me, or if you want to would love to have a conversation with you, how you can maybe come and advise us on how we should be prepped.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. And I think that's a very responsible thing to do as a supplier.
Sure. No, I think so. Appreciate it. No, you just opened my eyes. I'm like, wow, I don't know how to address these kind of questions if they come at me. So, thank you.
So, just kind of a quick example. I'm sure you guys will have your own that come into this. Software tools. So again, the bottom line is your supplier selection requirements are broader from a business perspective than what your QMS procedure would require. Similarly, if we're looking at software tools, non-product software validation always seems to be a very large topic for companies. If you ask a company, have you validated your software? Typically, they validate it to regulatory requirements. I just worked with a company to do an assessment because they had done an amazing job of documenting the regulatory requirements for a piece of software for the business. and they validated all of those. They'd also documented all of the requirements that they needed from a business perspective, like easy to get the data, do you have the data you need, who can access it. But since they were business requirements, they didn't bother validating them. And the tool rollout was not successful, as you might guess. It met all the regulatory requirements, but it did not meet the business requirements. That's kind of the bottom line, is that if you're just using the quality manual as your top level in the company, it really doesn't support a structure that includes the business processes in the right way you want to put them. If you set up a second system, which is typically what I've seen companies do, if they even have the business processes documented or formally laid out, typically they set it up as two separate systems, which is disconnected and really hard to work with. As we've looked at, there's a lot of overlap in all of these process areas between what the regulatory needs are and what the business needs are. So what do you do? QMS absolutely is necessary for regulatory compliance. Not saying that it's any less important than we all treat it. But if you only have processes that comply with the medical regulations, they're not sufficient for your business to succeed. And that's really kind of the bottom line that I want to get across if you're a startup company, is you need to pay attention to both the QMS and your business processes. So how do you set up a system that does this? So this is what I've come up with. I am open to feedback on this because this is just my ideas that have been floating around, and I'm sure you guys will help me improve it. But I have taken the approach of designing the system for business effectiveness first. So when I talk with a startup company, we talk about how do you want to run your business? How do you want to organize it? What pieces do you need? This isn't rocket science. This is like basic MBA level type stuff typically. It will look very similar to the categories that you get from 13485, but it allows the business to the flexibility and the freedom to not be constrained by 13485 or another standard. I've often heard and seen this, that there is a conflict between the quality department and what the business wants to do. I, for the life of me, cannot understand why there seems to be this conflict, because they both have the same goal, which is you want high quality medical products that meet the customer needs.
I totally agree with you. I actually say the same thing, but usually they just want the bare minimum of quality management systems.
Yeah. Actually,
I would say the answer to that is the QMS are almost never designed for business effectiveness. They're designed for auditors and inspectors, and they don't prioritize business processes or business activities.
right. They're designed to meet the regulations.
Yeah, I think the other impact is the quality is on the expense side as opposed to the revenue side.
Yeah, there's part of that too, and so that's a business perspective.
I'd like to add that Maren is one of my first medical device industry friends when I post cardiac science, and we had shared experience that I was in defibrillators and she was in defibrillators, and we met at, oh, I don't remember the name of the conference. It was a Marcus Evans thing, I think. Oh no, it was a Foster.
It was a Frost and Sullivan.
Frost and Sullivan event. It was in 12 early, and I had, or maybe 11. I hadn't even gotten the group yet, and we became fast friends. And as you all know, I have about as much room in my head to remember, oh, you're that guy, and you're that gal, and I should call you for this or call you for that. That's all I can basically handle. And Maren left this impression on me that, oh, she's a quality person. I can ask her a quality question. And so when the group first came under my leadership, I was getting questions about quality management systems, about which I knew absolutely nothing. And I said, Maren, is there such a thing as QMS in a box that people can just unpack and start using? And you said, no, there really isn't. I'm thinking of making one. And that was before I'd ever, actually, that's even before John Spear created Greenlight Guru. He was still, I forget the name of the company he was doing business as an independent. And that came about and I was like, oh, that's a thing. And full disclosure, they later became a big sponsor of the group. And that's all I came to know. And now I know them as this behemoth that costs a lot of money, out of reach for, I guess, a lot of startups. And on the other hand, you'll recall, everyone, that we had Nellie present, and she said, oh, all you need is an Excel spreadsheet. And I was like, wait, what? The number of systems and the way people are approaching it, it does not seem as though there's any kind of generally accepted standard, maybe to the peril of the industry, I don't know. There are a half dozen well-versed quality people on the phone. I'd gladly hear what you have to say about that kind of perspective.
Let me have you hold that question, if you will.
Okay, you got it.
Because we're going to get to that.
Okay.
Not necessarily that I have a solution, but we'll get to the question. So again, going back to the idea, you want to architect your whole broad system to include all the relevant processes. To Joe's point, you also want to discuss which processes need to be documented and to what level, right? And that can change as the company matures. So if I'm a really green startup with 3 people, having a like short kind of overview of my processes on one page may be sufficient. That may be all I need. As you grow and get to be more of a company, maybe you need to document different processes. I don't know if David is still on or not, but I saw that he had posted something about a checklist for presenters. That's a form of a business process that's very valuable to be documented for a startup company in terms of, if I'm presenting to an angel group, what are the factors, what are the things they're going to want to see and all of that. It's kind of like a process with a template. Wow, that's great. Design the system for the users. So you want business effectiveness, you want to design it for the users. All the standard stuff that you do for developing processes, including linking the outputs of one process to the input of others. And then at the end, you want to carve out or trace the quality management system processes for external auditors and for people like that. Again, going back to the idea that the goal of both the business and the QMS is coming up with high quality medical products. I have found, rough ballpark, 95 to 98% of the medical device requirements, again, we're talking about the requirement level, not the process level, are met if you design a process that's good for the business and wants the business to deliver a high quality medical product. So coming in at the end and doing the traceability to say, yep, I covered this one here, I covered this one here, I covered this one there, becomes a fairly quick activity. You do that because it helps you show the auditors you know what you're doing, but you're not designing to the regulations. You're not designing your process to the regulations. So what does that look like? Well, now you have a business management system with everything integrated all together. You overlay on top of that, basically, these are where my QMS requirements need to be applied. So this green circle, I've got product development, management, regulatory approvals. Now, incidentally, you may add additional circles to this, like finance may have a regulatory bubble over it for any financial regulations you need to meet. Resources may also have an OSHA bubble over it, right? So you can lay all of the other regulatory requirements that the business might need within this structure. So that's kind of the way I have started approaching quality management implementation, is understanding where the QMS fits in the larger business context. The way I document it doesn't necessarily say that, because auditors are used to seeing the QMS at the top of the, the company systems. But I don't see how you can effectively run a business looking at the QMS as your top level.
This speaks to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you approach this? Because this is kind of different than the way I was looking at quality management system design for probably 20 years. So the first thing I would say is just be aware that this is here and start planning for it. I recently had a great discussion with a startup because we were talking about their pitch presentation, where they were at, and they said, oh yeah, so we've got our prototypes and we've got suppliers building it and we've done some clinical studies and we've gotten really good results. And I said, so what are you doing about your processes? And they said, oh, well, we're going to be in an accelerator program starting in a couple months, and that's when we're going to do our QMS. And I said, oh, so you don't have a QMS? No, we're not using a QMS right now. We went and we looked at like one of the standards, and I said, okay, so tell me about, are you making management decisions right now? Oh yeah. Are you saving documents? Oh yeah. Are you selecting suppliers? Oh yeah. Are you doing production? And I said, you realize you are actually doing activities that fall under the QMS. You have a process you're following. It's just not documented yet. So going back to what I'm sure Nellie and Michelle talk about, startups should be looking at the requirements, particularly the basic med device requirements, when they're starting up. Because you do all these activities, there's a lot of fear and trepidation, particularly among non-quality people, about going to look at the regulations. Oh my God, it's going to be so scary. Take a look at the table of contents in 13485. It's like, I don't know, a dozen pages of things which are actually pretty straightforward English. So even if you're not a quality person, if you're a marketing person like Joe and the quality stuff is kind of all over the place, just take a look at it. It will take the mystique away from regulations if you just take a look at what the content is. They're not very complicated, really. And it helps if everybody in the business understands what is in scope of the quality management system regulations, because a lot of your normal business day activities are under those types of requirements.
I like to tell people the most complicated QMS processes are complaints and CAPAs. I said everything else we can make it simple and align with your business. And so when I have a standard package, but I always say, okay, how does your business want to function? And then we update it to make sure it aligns with the standards. Yeah. But I think you've come up with a very nice, clean way of approaching it. I think I've been doing it inherently, but maybe not directly.
Yeah. The other advice I have to startups is, even if you don't have a QMS yet, from a business value perspective, write down the processes that you're currently using. Mm-hmm. If you picked a supplier, write down why you picked them, what the criteria were. Even if it's informally written down, that information will then be there for you when you actually do have to write it down in a more formal way. A lot of people approach the QMS with, oh, I can't operate in the QMS until I have the absolute final document. No, there is a draft version of documents and a way of developing documents that's part of the QMS process. So you may write down information under a QMS procedure and it may never get released because you decide it's not important. So we tend to ascribe this very rigid formality to QMS that doesn't need to be there. But write down all your procedures, right? Even if it's just a little set of bullet points. That's incredibly valuable tribal knowledge that you have for your business that you're losing. Then think about how you want your business structured, include the regulatory impacts, and do a draft architecture of your business processes. Like literally you can do this in probably 10 minutes because it's pretty standard. You got marketing, sales, product development, finance, right? All the things that I put up on the slide. And if you just start with that, you're probably going to be 90 to 95% of the way there, which is a great place for a startup company. And then, you know, look at your regulations as you're getting more formal and identify any gaps. The other thing you can with this is you can, if you have the structure, just like what you do in product development, you can say, oh, I don't need a complaint procedure yet. I don't need a CAPA procedure yet. I don't need my regulatory submission procedures yet, but I know where they fit in the system. I know what information I'm going to need for that when I get there. So I'm not going to spend the time and energy to create them, but I've got the framework there when I need it. And then my contact information, just in case you have any follow-up questions. So that is what I have for the presentation. It's taken me a number of years to get my head wrapped around the idea that it's okay to put the business needs first before the quality needs.
Maren, may I ask you a few questions?
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, it's nice that you are an electrical engineer. It makes me feel less alone here. Are you still a little bit of nerd inside?
Pardon?
Are you still a little bit of a nerd inside, or?
Oh, absolutely. This is
Okay.
all very nerdish, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it
This
is.
feeling of loneliness, is that why you're always coming to the meetings, drinking?
No. It's just my Friday afternoon drink.
It is not related to your career or the way you,
No.
this is related.
No, if I would be win the lottery and become a millionaire and become an angel like you, I don't think I would do it like that. I think my first question to a startup would be, who do you hire to take out the complexity of setting up everything in your quality system and your regulations and setting up the business? Because if you would say, well, I hire Luke and they're all finished, and then we say, I hire Nelly or Michelle, and say, that's good. Because it's I think for a startup, a lot of startups, they invent something and they go to business classes, and they learn the importance is the marketing mix, and the importance is all kind of things that are not really important in medical device development. So usually I think when they come at your place, they already start off on the wrong foot, and then you see that they have not looked up the ISO 38485 or whatever, and they have to start all over again. But is it not more handy just to ask for who do you hire for all the complexity?
That is, you mean from an angel perspective? A lot of the companies that have gotten to the angel level have already hired a quality management system consultant, or they've hired somebody to bring it in. And again, how you approach the quality management system, I think, is a business strategy. There are off-the-shelf systems that you can buy, and I've found one from a gentleman in California that I have used and I think is pretty good. If you are only planning on being in business, or you're planning on selling before you ever get to market, then it may make most financial sense for the company to just buy something off the shelf and do it, because then you're literally just trying to make sure you show that you can meet the regulation.
And also, if you're starting, you can funnel yourself in whatever system you can buy off the shelf. And if you already started, then you have to change everything into your system. That's how.
Don't have existing processes, so it does tend to be a little bit easier. But again, the idea is to discuss and plan what's the level of documentation, what's the level of process that makes sense for my company, and that includes your business strategy. If you're not planning a business that's around for 20 years, putting a lot of time into developing a good business infrastructure might not be a good use of your resources. That's a perfectly acceptable answer.
There are a few comments I want to interject that those of you who are at 10X in San Diego, I've had this piece of paper on my desk since I got home. The notion of writing a book together. So you want to make a medical device. And I think your simple approach to basically don't be so afraid of QMS, you're probably already doing part of it, just not writing it down, is a lot less intimidating than even, I know you say it's just 20 pages, just saying, you know what? It'd be great if you read ISO 1345. I'm like, I don't
Now
do it.
just look at the table of contents.
I know, but just a document of, and also friends here know that I'm big into like clickbaity kind of headlines that grab attention. While you were talking, I thought, and I haven't put this through the analyzer or anything, but who's afraid of the big bad QMS? I think is something that I think Nellie just said, yeah, that's the name of a new video I'm going to do. Nellie's getting her
So-
marketing mojo up. We just started talking about it.
So Rains has had his hand up.
Baines has had his hand up. We recognize the gentleman in the corner.
I did. Thank you. So there's two things. I mean, first thing, what Luke was just saying, to me, just there's two ends of the spectrum. People that aren't convinced that process and documented information is valuable. And then there's people who are convinced. Maren, you gave the example, you have this checklist to do a presentation. That's a thinking tool that gives you some confidence that might help you, identify something you missed. It makes your job easier. I always think about thinking isn't free, right?
Right.
If you have a framework, if you have a template, you can get started. Even, having done this, as long as I have, I still want to start with the template. I'm still going to reference back to the standard or some past deliverable. Starting from scratch is a waste. And
Exactly.
to me, it's hard to, people fall into those two camps. They either have experienced that and they know having a framework, having a process, writing things down to check back against will actually help them get there faster if it's designed well. Or there's people who don't yet believe that and think multitasking is more effective and not having process is more effective. But that comes down to design, like you said, which is, to me, the crux. I've thought about this. I actually wrote a blog post, RAQA as a design discipline, because you use the word design and architect, and RAQA doesn't think of themselves as designers. They don't, know what design thinking is or systems thinking. And I think there's this huge paradigm problem where RAQA can't be a compliance discipline. We need to almost pick one additional discipline, whether it's user experience, usability engineering, information development, something to make the quality management systems more valuable. Because at the end of the day, RAQA is designing business processes that constrain
Yes.
how people work. We're designing information. I've been in so many sessions where the templates actually drive how a device is designed. The design is almost never finalized when the team starts to write it down in the QMS. And
Shouldn't be. You should start
No.
drafting it immediately.
yeah, and actually, the templates and the process helps tease these things out that the engineering team didn't think of. And it's like, that was helpful. We wouldn't have brainstormed that out. But like you said, it's got to be well designed. And that's the pushback against quality management systems is, RAQA aren't designers. They don't talk about design and architecting good systems with an excellent experience that's easy to develop and maintain. It's like a product. It's like software, and quality
Yes.
management systems aren't treated like that. So
And that was kind of my engineering sensibility around product development that I carried over into quality management system.
Yeah.
So my background coming into quality management system, I see this as directly analogous to product development.
yeah, it should be a business product. That's the way I think about it.
I did want to make a comment back to Luke. Part of where I'm involved earlier in the startup infrastructure is that I'm a mentor for startup companies, both at Life Science Washington, which is our local nonprofit for startups. And I'm also involved with a couple mentoring programs for startup companies at UW. So in those instances, I'm trying to get to the student teams very early to talk about this idea that you're already doing quality management system stuff. And then, so one of the ways that I've found often helps with talking with pure business types that think they don't want processes is we talk about tribal knowledge. And we talk about where in your business do you wish that you would have been able to find information that you couldn't, or that was only available in people's heads. If you watch LinkedIn, Dazuki has been putting out some really great videos about tribal knowledge and what does a business look like when it's running on tribal knowledge. Really fun examples that I think illustrate this idea that you do want to write down information for a business to operate consistently. And if you put it in those terms, then you can sometimes get through to those people who say, oh, I don't want processes or overhead. Because typically,
aren't you?
Typically, even if you're a CEO, you get really grumpy if there's no visible process to tell you how to, sign up for your paycheck or to schedule your vacation or to do things like that. And you say, well, those are processes. I have a great example, which I love to use, which I'll try to keep very short. We got new coffee pots in at a company I was working at. They were large, high volume coffee pots because we went through a lot of coffee. They were just set out on the shelf. The next day, there was a little sign above them which said, make sure that you put the coffee pot underneath before pouring the water in, because these were the kind where as soon as you poured the water in, the coffee would start spitting out. So first pass, everybody poured the coffee in with the big urn, and then the coffee was already spewing out by the time they put the urn under. So now we have a little sign with this. By 6 weeks later, there was like a 1.5-page process that had evolved organically to talk about how much coffee went in and all of that. So there's an example of a process that was built because there was a business need. It wasn't quality controlled, it was dated, so we actually knew when it went up. But processes can be written down organically. They don't necessarily need to be within the context of my document control system.
Yep. It's interesting. I actually have processes around the home. And like, for example, caring for my dogs, everybody comes in, it's like, there's instructions on all the vitamins and everybody has prescriptions and they go, oh my God, you've implemented quality for the dogs. And I'm like, no, it's a process.
Alyssa?
Right.
I think that's the issue at hand is people are so tired of reading. So like when one simple line turned into a 1.5 pages of how to make coffee, that's when people get overwhelmed. I think that there is a really nice business model that could be a subscription model here, where it's the entire company has a little like video that they can watch for like 3 minutes, and it's just where you say, okay, this is what we're tackling this week for quality management. It'll take you 10 minutes, and as a team with your tribal knowledge, because as a CEO, we need to know what we don't know. And quality management is one of those things where I'm going to spend an enormous amount of time reading and not get very far because it's a lot of reading, whereas it could have been in one quick line. And I think that it could be a really nice subscription model here, because in marketing, we have our quality management processes with document control numbers, with all sorts of labeling and all that good stuff. So, I mean, there's a breadth of knowledge that is absolutely necessary to run a company.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. I generally will provide templates, but I don't require templates. And I try to leave the content or the presentation as open as possible. So, you can write a process in Word, and we have all seen those really long ones. You can do it in an Excel spreadsheet with just a set of steps. You can do it in a PowerPoint. You can do it in a video. I've also tried to start going to a model where you do just-in-time training, because I think it's usually horribly wasteful for a company to go through and train everybody on a procedure you're not going to use for 6 to 8 months. So, for example, I will include in the release, I'll have the SOP, I'll have the templates, and then I'll have the training all in the same folder. So if somebody's coming in to use it, the training's there to quickly look at and go, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. I try to remove, I've seen systems where they'll put the process requirements in with the procedure, which to my mind only makes them longer and wordier and isn't value added. So all of these things are flexibility that we have in the way that we structure our quality systems in a way to make them more usable and available for the people that have to use them. And again, my first is business effectiveness. My second is, are they usable? And I think you should use whatever means are appropriate to make them useful, because none of the quality management system regulations say you have to use Microsoft Word. None of them do, even though you might think about it from looking at quality management systems.
Maren,
Well,
are
it
you-
can also keep the CEO accountable to it, as well as saying, hey, did you do your homework that Maren assigned you this week? Is that done? Show it to me so I can see what it looks like for whomever you've hired for quality management. And so it keeps the CEO top level knowledge without wasting a lot of, not wasting, but without taking up a lot of time.
Yep. So Joe, I know we're about ready to wrap.
No, it's not so much that. There are at least two people that Dimitri just joined us. He's our newest MDG premium member. I'd like to introduce him. And Mehdi has decided to grace us again after like 6 months of being too busy to stop in. So I want him to give us an update. But before that, are you taking new clients at this time?
Sorry, you dropped out?
Are you taking new clients?
I am.
You are? Okay. You waffled on that one time when I asked you, so, okay.
Yeah, no, I have bandwidth. I have bandwidth now for taking on new people.
Fair enough. Next week, Gary Stainer joins us again. Those of you who were here with us last week, he's going to do UDI Part 2, which is answering every unanswered question from UDI Part 1, as well as handling Europe, which is very timely for our London event in 6 weeks. Dimitri, welcome, and would you introduce yourself to your new friends?
Thanks, Joe. Hello, friends and family. My name is Dimitri Mills. I'm very happy to be here. I'm out of the Bay Area, originally from Chicago. My background is in finance and operations and supply chain management. I have a master's degree from Pepperdine in Los Angeles. Kind of always been working in medical device fields, Boston Scientific, Cooper Vision, and some other companies, pretty large companies. Just like some people, I got to a point where corporate America I was hitting a wall. And I couldn't figure out why that wall was hit, why it kept hitting. So I changed to personal development and I started focusing on changing the person that I am. And from there, I became John Maxwell certified. I do a lot of things with the Tony Robbins team. And I've switched to financial services. I'm part of the FIRE movement, Financial Independence Retire Early. I just turned 50. And I am working on helping small communities change their understanding of money and improving themselves. A lot of times things are disseminated from our parents and down the lines, and we're unable to move forward because of that. So I do a ton of financial education. I have a nonprofit, travel all across the country, just explaining some of these concepts. I also have taken the money that I've made through these processes, and I do some startup funding, development, and things of that nature. I have about 7 companies. Most of them are medical device related. One of them that I will like to talk about at some point in the future is a company called Anapol, who has come up with a process to prevent or treat HIV, brain cancer, tuberculosis using high frequency radio waves. So it can definitely be a groundbreaking type technology. I have a couple other companies, but yeah, so I mean, I'm just really focused on helping myself be the best version of myself, helping people be the best version of themselves, and then doing the same things with companies so that we can change this beautiful world that we live in.
Wow, that's great. And Paul, I know you're chomping at the bit. Paul is happily married, but he is already in love with you. You guys have so much in common. He's a supply chain guy, and he's got his healing ranch with horses that people come and he inspires and coaching, blah, blah. Save it, Paul. We know. You can get a room and talk to Dimitri afterward, okay?
I introduced you to Dimitri. What the hell are you talking about?
Oh, I forgot that part.
Dimitri and I have been buddies for a long time. He was very instrumental in helping me get on the ranch. In fact, my 1130 is with somebody else he introduced me to, who potentially wants to use my ranch as a sanctuary for dogs. Yeah, so Dimitri and I are definitely 2 peas in the same pod.
That was a little embarrassing for the host of this call, right?
That's okay. That's okay.
Mehdi, come back on camera, please.
Yeah, Mehdi, man, looking forward to seeing Mehdi again.
Hey guys, how are you?
Up. He came with 2 co-founders in the middle of a COVID blowing up. And we talked a lot about COVID back then. And I mean, like, there were a lot of people that we talked with that day.
Yeah.
You needed some of this, you needed some of that. And then I've been so busy. Let's hear about you're so busy.
So
And you moved.
yes, hey guys, so good to see everybody. It was fun to jump back in and immediately just learned so much. In some ways, just reminded me of all the things that we got to do that we've been ignoring. So I don't know how I feel about that, but
Listen here, folks.
but just one clarification. I don't use the word busy. I wasn't busy. I just had to rearrange my priorities so I could make this a priority. And so just like you guys heard, I just moved to San Francisco from Texas, not just in March. I came here to be closer to the tech scene. My background is in medical device. I have a graduate degree in biomedical engineering. Since I was 18, I've been working in healthcare. Just like Dimitri, I have my hands in a few different things. What pays the bills is I do marketing for startup medtech devices. I have a couple of clients under my belt. I've also partnered with a group of doctors, and we have about 5 urgent care and primary care clinics in the DFW Metroplex that we are growing. And thirdly, we have a medical device that we invented back in 2018. And then in last year, we were able to get emergency use authorization from the FDA because of its application with COVID. And that just catapulted us to fundraising mode. And we were able to fundraise by the end of last year. And the past 6 months has just gone by. So there I am. I'm happy to be here again. I've made it a priority to be joining this call and be among my peers every Friday. And I look forward to learning from you guys.
Thanks. And you and I are going to talk right after this. We have our speaker for next week and 3 weeks from now, the 19th, I still have open. So someone who has something to share, let me know. And maybe you too will be our featured guest. Mark, welcome. You're welcome back anytime. And the reason that Alan DeRosa put us in touch was because you need some help on a couple of things, among them regulatory and quality. So you met Maren today. Michelle, if you want to come back on camera, she's one of my go-tos for anything regulatory. So submissions and the like, you'll want to talk with her. And well, basically, if you need a functional expertise in medical device, I probably know a gal or a guy that can help you. So leverage the network as best you can. For Joe Hage and Joe Hage Enterprises, this has been Joe Hage. Thank you for joining the call, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.
See you guys.
Thanks, Joe. Bye-bye.